Nobody truly knows why it was built. Nobody truly knows how it was built. And nobody truly knows exactly what remains inside there to be discovered.
What if Egypt's greatest monument isn't what we thought it was? For thousands of years, the Great Pyramid of Giza has towered over the dry landscape of Egypt, a landmark from ages past. But what if we've misunderstood the true purpose of this structure for so long?
This is why they're putting these stones that weigh 50 to 80 tons in the center. They're almost like batteries. And with that, you have yourself an energy source.
Hidden chambers, secret tunnels, and a host of secrets that could change our perception of history forever. Take a trip back in time as we unlock the unknown mysteries of the Great Pyramid and challenge everything you thought you knew about the past. Inside the Great Pyramid, 481 feet tall, 756 feet wide, over 2.3 million blocks perfectly stacked together. Behold the Great Pyramid of Giza. The year was 1798. Napoleon Bonaparte, drawn by the beauty of the Nile, led his crew on a journey to this ancient magical land. That was when he first saw the Great Pyramid of Giza up close. This architectural wonder had been standing for over 4,000 years at this point, and its fame had spread far and wide. After all, it was the tallest man-made structure on Earth. Standing before the pyramid, Napoleon was determined to spend a night alone inside the king's chamber, a granite-lined vault situated at the very center of the magnificent structure. Many historians believe this was where Pharaoh Khufu was laid to rest. But Napoleon wouldn't be the first man to step into the pyramid. Back in the 9th century AD, Al-Ma'mun, the 7th caliph of the Abbasid Empire, broke through the wall to feast his eyes upon the wonders locked inside.
This is where the roots of the pyramid, this is where it all began.
At the entrance of the pyramid, there are huge blocks of limestone, and then a bit further down, there's a tunnel so small, visitors have to crawl through. Deep within this ancient structure is a narrow, dark, and rather scary world, with endless tunnels and hot and sticky air. To get to the king's chamber, you'll have to climb this stairway known as the Grand Gallery. And right in the middle of the king's chamber lies an empty sarcophagus, which used to contain the mummified remains of a pharaoh.
There is the name of Khufu in the ring. Yeah.
For many Egyptologists, this is the most powerful point in the pyramid, where all the divine energy is located. Somewhere inside this room is a mysterious air shaft, which was apparently built to allow the pharaoh's spirit to ascend to the stars. For the most part, the pyramid appears quite uninteresting on the inside, and there are two reasons why. One, the place has been looted so many times that most of the artifacts have been carted away. And two, the most fascinating portions of the pyramid still remain unexplored.
It beats me how they did it. I've set out buildings with optical instruments, with the aid of cranes to place the stones, and sometimes I don't get them that accurate.
Navigating the cramped passages with nothing but a candle, Napoleon ventured into the pyramid to spend the night. But by the time he emerged the next morning, he looked absolutely white and shaken, unable to speak of the horrors his eyes had seen inside the ancient structure. For the next 23 years, Napoleon kept quiet about the events of that fateful night. But as he lay on his deathbed, the emperor's mind wandered back to the dark crevices of the pyramid, and he decided it was time to talk. Rising upright from his sleep, Napoleon began to speak. But just before he uttered the secrets he'd been protecting for years, he stopped. "Oh, what's the use? You'd never believe me," Napoleon murmured before slumping into the bed. Debunking, Napoleon's private secretary, had disputed this story many times, claiming that the explorer never went into the pyramid. But could it be possible that the pyramid really holds magical powers wielded by the ancient Egyptians? What hidden secrets are locked away in these unexplored chambers? To fully understand how powerful this structure is, we must go back to the times before the pyramid was even constructed. The unknown origin. Who taught the ancient Egyptians how to build such a massive structure? Was it the aliens, the Jews, or some supernatural beings with superhuman powers? For decades, several theories have been spread concerning the true origin of the pyramid, but how much of it is really true?
This is an amazing amount of accuracy for a structure this big, this long ago.
The idea that aliens built the pyramids might be the most famous controversy surrounding the structure. For many people, this is the only reasonable explanation for how such an impressive building came to be. Or how else would you explain ancient humans constructing a building almost as tall as the Eiffel Tower without cranes, power tools, or any other form of advanced mechanical equipment? It almost seemed impossible, so they must have gotten help from aliens, right? Well, not really, because even after decades of studying the pyramid, there's no actual evidence that there was any extraterrestrial involvement in the building process. Going by historical records, it's easy to see that the Great Pyramid of Giza was designed, planned, and constructed totally by humans. But who were these humans? Was it the Jews? Well, a lot of historians seem to believe so, and it's all thanks to the overlapping history recorded in the Bible. You see, according to the book of Exodus, the people of Israel lived as slaves in Egypt for over 400 years, forced to perform hard labor throughout their stay. Although the Bible doesn't exclusively state that they built the pyramids, some historians draw a parallel between this story and the origin of the pyramids. However, archaeological findings in Egypt have disproved this narrative for a while now. According to Zahi Hawass, an Egyptian antiquities chief, the claim that Jews built the pyramid is an attempt to rewrite history, since it's clear that Jews weren't in Egypt at the time the pyramid was built.
But the discovery of the tombs of the pyramid builders reconstruct history and tell us that the builders of the pyramids were Egyptians and the builder of the pyramids were not slaves.
So if aliens didn't build the pyramids and the Jews didn't, is it then possible that it was built by slaves? This is one of the major theories that have been spread for so long, except it's not true. Of course, everyone knows such a mega project would require an extremely large workforce. We're talking over 30,000 workers toiling day and night for 20 straight years to make sure the king's tomb was completed on time. However, historical records also show that these men were paid for their labor. As a matter of fact, many of them lived on wages that surpassed the average citizen, feeding on meals some citizens couldn't afford and living in barrack-like tents. They weren't forced, coerced, or tricked into it. They did of their own free will. However, we still haven't answered the most important question of all. Where did the idea for this design come from, and how did they stack these stones together to form this mind-blowing structure? To understand how these ancient Egyptians crafted such a structure, we must go back to the very first pyramid ever built. The Pyramid of Giza. Standing at 205 feet tall, about the size of a 14-story building, this ancient pyramid, located in the Saqqara necropolis, was the Egyptians' first attempt at building a pyramid. Sure, the Giza pyramid is the most famous due to its incredible size, but before embarking on such an ambitious project, the ancient Egyptians had a lot of time to practice. As a matter of fact, 4 different pyramids were built before the foundation of the Great Pyramid was even laid. So the design wasn't entirely new. The Giza pyramid, for example, was designed by an Egyptian architect known as Imhotep to house the body of the 3rd dynasty pharaoh Djoser once he passed away.
This was the first time that anyone had ever thought of doing this.
That's right. This is why we believe Imhotep was a genius architect.
The Djoser pyramid started off as a mastaba tomb with a flat roof and sloping sides. It would take years of expansions to transform it into a 205-foot tall building, with 6 layers built on top of each other. As for the material used, the pyramid was constructed with over 11.6 million cubic feet of stone and clay. Beneath the structure, you will find a tunnel forming a labyrinth that's about 3.5 miles long. After the construction was completed, the builders covered it with Tura limestone, most of which has been weathered away over the years. Way before Egyptian rulers started getting buried in pyramids, their mummified remains were preserved in smaller mastaba tombs. But with the amount of treasures these pharaohs were buried with, their graveyards kept attracting robbers who could easily dig and cart away the artifacts. This was the main reason the step pyramid came into play. The new tomb design made it practically impossible for the robbers to get to the treasure just by digging from the top. And with the amount of time it took to complete this first pyramid, it's likely the ancient Egyptians went through a lot of trial and error to understand what works and what doesn't. Since no one was building this kind of structure at the time, they had to go through a learning curve to understand which material would be durable enough to last thousands of years, and how best to stack them to avoid damage.
a testament to ancient Egyptians' ingenuity, acumen, and technical and scientific prowess.
So the Egyptians didn't just stumble on the design one day. They had to try and fail and work on smaller projects before finally embarking on what could be classified as the biggest building project in ancient Egypt. The building process. When people question how the pyramid was built, the major debate is usually focused on how the blocks were moved up the superstructure, where the blocks came from, and how these men managed to move over 3 million of them to the construction site. Remember, this was hundreds of years before any form of construction machinery was invented. Even the wheel wasn't invented at this point. However, the only issue is that there is no archaeological evidence to show us how they did it. The Egyptians didn't leave any clues or documents detailing the building process, or a blueprint to give us an idea of how they undertook such an ambitious project. All we can rely on is speculation from the little clues we have. So based on what we know, here's how the Egyptians probably did it. The first person to document the construction of the Great Pyramid was Herodotus around the 5th century BC, and this was centuries after it was completed. Then there was Diodorus Siculus, who also wrote about it in the 1st century BC. According to the accounts of Herodotus, the Egyptians used a machine now known as the Herodotus machine, and it looked something like this. Since the whole thing was constructed with stones, these Egyptian engineers chose their locally quarried limestone as the material of choice. But where did they get this limestone? For the outer casing, they chose the quarry at Tura, near the city we now know as Cairo. As for the granite used in some of the architectural elements, it came from a quarry near Aswan. This granite was also used in the outer casing on certain occasions. Carving the limestone wasn't as difficult as the granite, since it's much softer, so the workers relied on their copper chisels, drills, and saws. While these may be considered as crude tools today, for a generation that didn't have cranes and power tools, it was more than enough.
The ancient Egyptians were laying these enormous stones, 2 of them, every 3 minutes. Now, they slowed down a little bit as they got towards the top, but overall, they kept up that frantic pace for 14 years.
As for the harder stones that couldn't be cut with copper tools, the workers had to spend hours pounding them with dolerite, drilling through and sawing them using abrasive materials such as quartz sand. This process is now known as sand abrasion, and although it's time-consuming, these ancient builders didn't really have any other options. So how did they transport the stones to the construction site? Well, they used specially crafted sledge, which looked something like this.
The great thing is that you can get half a dozen men and a lot of water, stick a stone on mud, and you can slide it like ice.
Lubricating the path with water made it much easier to move these massive blocks of stones for miles. A good description of this can be seen in the tomb of Jehutihotep, where archaeologists found an illustration of 172 men pulling an alabaster statue of the pharaoh on a sledge. So based on the weight of the statue, which is about 60 tons, that means about 45 workers were required to move a block weighing 35,900 pounds. For a typical 6,060-pound block, they needed 8 workers. Some historians also believe that the Egyptians may have actually rolled the stones using a cradle-like machine that has been found in several New Kingdom temples. By fitting 4 of these objects around a block of stone, a number of workers could easily roll them from the quarry to the construction site. The truth is, we still don't know how they did it, but most Egyptologists agree that the blocks were pulled on sledges. Over 4,500 years ago, an Egyptian official filled a logbook known as the Diary of Mera, and it might just be the final clue we need to confirm the theories about the pyramid's construction. This ancient document was found in 2013 by a team of French archaeologists led by Pierre Tellet in a cave situated in Wadi al-Jarf. Strangely, it described the transportation of limestone blocks from the quarries at Tura to Giza by boats, adding another option to our list. But while we debate on how they got the blocks to the site, there's also the mystery surrounding how the blocks were raised from the ground up. For the most part, Egyptologists believe they used ramps to move the blocks, but there's no general agreement on how the ramps were constructed. Many archaeological evidence supporting this theory has been found at the Great Pyramid and other pyramids, but since this was so long ago, there isn't enough evidence for us to draw a perfect conclusion. The remnants we found only show the small ramps that were inclined causeways, which are way too small to construct even a majority of the monument. As stated earlier, the Egyptians had over 30,000 workers at the Great Pyramid. 5,000 of these were permanent workers on salaries, with the rest working 2 to 3 month shifts. For the most part, historians believe there were lots of volunteers working on the pyramid. This is because, according to ancient Egyptian customs, able-bodied men were required to work for the pharaoh for a stipulated time. And with such a huge project going on in the empire, it wouldn't be unusual to find a few thousand people contributing their quota through hard labor. These men, along with the paid workers, were divided into 2 crews of approximately 2,000 workers. These were then subdivided into named gangs of about 1,000, and then split into files of 200. At the most basic level, the 200 were then broken down into a group of around 20 workers, according to their skills. Although most historians put the number of workers at about 30,000, Herodotus recorded a much higher number. Specifically 100,000 workers, but these workers just didn't stack the blocks on each other and prayed it didn't crumble. To fill the gaps, huge quantities of gypsum and rubble were poured into the gaps. The main idea was to stabilize the construction, and it worked perfectly. But away from the construction process and the materials, there's one question we still haven't answered. Is the pyramid magical? The magical pyramid. Scientists just discovered that the Great Pyramid of Giza can collect and concentrate electromagnetic energy in its chambers and base, and it might just be the most important discovery of this century, or at least that's what archaeologists believe. According to researchers from the ITMO University in St. Petersburg, the pyramid is able to concentrate electric and magnetic energy in ways that most ancient buildings can't and shouldn't. To figure this out, they created a model of the pyramid and measured its electromagnetic response. This way, they were able to measure how the wave energy was scattered and absorbed by the pyramid, as well as its interaction with waves of resonant length ranging from 200 meters to 600 meters. Under the right conditions, this could be used to control the propagation and reflection of radio waves. But is there a possibility that the ancient Egyptians knew all of these? Did they build the pyramid to control and transmit electromagnetic energy? Did they even know what all of these mean? To be honest, that's highly unlikely. But if there was anyone who believed that the pyramids held some magical powers, it was Nikola Tesla. Some call him a mad scientist, others call him a genius. But regardless of what you think about him, there's no denying that Nikola Tesla stepped into some uncharted waters in the world of science. One of them was the study of pyramids and the immense power they held. According to Tesla, the Egyptian pyramids, especially the Great Pyramid, weren't just built to house the dead pharaohs. Instead, they were giant transmitters of energy. Not only did he believe they were magical, but Tesla actually conducted several experiments to prove his hypothesis. In 1905, the famous inventor filed a patent in the US titled The Art of Transmitting Electrical Energy Through the Natural Medium, showcasing his designs for a series of generators around the world which would tap into the ionosphere to generate energy. For Tesla, the Earth itself was like a giant generator, capable of providing unlimited energy to sustain human life until the end of time. This ingenious design Tesla proposed would later become known as the electromagnetic pyramid. However, it wasn't just the shape of the pyramid that intrigued Tesla, there was also the strategic location. The deserts of Egypt have long been famous for their unique landscape, but Tesla saw beyond the sandy deserts. He saw a place where immense energy was situated and possibly harvested by the ancient Egyptians. It's a crazy thought, but is it possible that these men knew a thing or two about harnessing the Earth's energy that we still haven't figured out? Maybe. Tesla was so obsessed with this idea of a pyramid that he built 2 different structures in that same unique shape. The Tesla Experimental Station in Colorado Springs and the Wardenclyffe Tower on the East Coast are 2 of his greatest achievements, and they both take their inspiration from the pyramids. Again, not just the shape, but the location as well. Using the same laws that helped decide the location of the Giza pyramids, Tesla studied the relationship between the elliptical orbit of the planet and the equator, selecting a spot where the wireless transmission of energy would be done seamlessly. Unfortunately, lack of support and adequate funding stopped Tesla's vision of free energy. Before we go on, check out our subscribers pick for today. The year was 2010, when archaeologists discovered a locked chamber inside Egypt's ancient pyramid that has never been opened. It was Rob Richardson and his team of robotics engineers who who took on the challenge to explore this tiny hole. Because it was so small, they had to build a robot that would fit perfectly into the hole, reach the end of the shaft, and show us what's hidden inside. Traveling along a shaft that measured about 20 by 20 centimeters, the robot moved for about 60 meters, surveying the surroundings and filming the interior. Inside, the scientists found intricate colored markings on the floor, along with a second blocking stone that ended the journey. But what was hidden beyond this second stone remains a mystery, and we still don't know why the ancient Egyptians thought it was so important to build this tiny shaft in the middle of such a huge monument. What do you think is hidden inside this shaft? Let us know in the comments below. But while we've been able to get a glimpse of this hidden chamber, there are still many that remain hidden within the walls of the pyramid. New secret chambers discovered. At the base of the Great Pyramid of Giza lies hundreds of rectangular tombs known as mastabas. These burial sites housed the mummified remains of the rich and powerful citizens of ancient Egypt, along with relatives of the ancient Egyptian king Khufu. Among the many rows of tombs, archaeologists have found one area of the cemetery with no structures. On the surface, it looks like a flat, sandy surface, but only a couple of feet into the ground, you will find what appears to be an L-shaped structure. And when you go even deeper, you'll find another, much larger structure connected to the first. While studying the site, archaeologists noted that the corners were too sharp to have occurred naturally. According to researcher Motoyuki Sato, who helped find the structure, it looks like it was actually constructed by humans, although we still don't know what exactly it is. Some believe it could be remnants of an ancient tomb, but until the site is excavated, we can't really say for sure. But from what we know, some parts of the L-shaped structure used to be filled with sand, which could give us a clue about what it was used for. Perhaps it was a passageway to a lower tomb, the kind that ancient Egyptians would fill with sand to keep out unwanted visitors. Excavation is currently going on at the site, and according to the scientists working on it, we may be much closer to unearthing the truth than we've ever been. However, that's not the only weird discovery made around the Great Pyramid recently. Earlier in 2024, archaeologists found a never-before-seen chamber in the Great Pyramid using advanced scanning technology. At about 30 feet long and 6 feet wide, this new unexplored chamber was found near the main entrance on the Great Pyramid. Armed with high-tech equipment, scientists working with the Scan Pyramids project scanned the entire pyramid to uncover the unseen sections and showcase what the structure really looks like on the outside. What they didn't expect to find was a secret chamber that could hold the very secrets of ancient Egypt. Christian Gross, a professor of non-destructive testing, was one of the scientists in charge of this project. According to him, several techniques have been deployed to locate the chamber since it was discovered. They've used ultrasound measurements and ground-penetrating radars, but were only able to find it using advanced radiography. At the end chamber, there are two large limestones blocking what looks like an entrance, and the big question is, what's behind those limestone blocks? Mostafa Waziri, a member of the Antiquities Supreme Council, believes this discovery is just a first step towards more discoveries of this kind. He claims this unfinished corridor was probably used to distribute the weight of the pyramid around the main entrance used by tourists, or another undiscovered chamber somewhere inside the pyramid. This newly discovered chamber joins the list of tunnels and corridors that have been found in the pyramid, including one that was spotted in 2017. But what's with the tunnels and chambers? For many years, historians believed this was a result of changes in plans. The theory was that because the pharaoh became more and more divine as he grew older, the architects had to keep switching up the design to accommodate the changes. But many experts don't believe this is true. Mark Lehner, for example, believes the design for the pyramid was completed before construction even started. According to the Egyptologist, every single one of the 3,700 chambers were included in the original design, not added later during construction. Many of these were supposedly used for burials, which is quite interesting since Khufu was never buried within the pyramid. It might sound pretty sound, but the pharaoh the Great Pyramid was built for wasn't buried in the pyramid. So does it mean it wasn't supposed to be a tomb? Why else would a pharaoh want a pyramid built in his name? Some historians claim Khufu planned to use it as a storehouse for ancient wisdom, more like the Library of Alexandria. Others claim it was either an energy accumulator or some kind of map. However, the truth is, unless scientists manage to invent a time machine, we might probably never fully understand why or how the Great Pyramid was built. Perhaps it was just a way for Khufu to show off his architectural ambition, creating an engineering marvel that would keep the whole world amazed for generations. Or maybe it's really a tomb and we just haven't figured out where the bodies are yet. Or maybe the conspiracy theories are true, and the pyramid is a portal to another universe, a gift from the aliens, or an energy source that could literally power the whole Earth forever. Whatever the truth may be, one thing is very sure: the Great Pyramid will continue to trigger our curiosity for generations to come. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.